She was always away for work. I never questioned it until a hotel manager called me about a left-behind item. It wasn't hers. It was mine. I always thought I had the perfect marriage. We'd been together for 6 years, married for 4, and everything seemed to fall into place so naturally. She worked as a pharmaceutical rep, which meant constant travel, conferences, client meetings, and overnight stays at hotels across 3 states. I supported her career wholeheartedly because I knew how passionate she was about it and how hard she'd worked to build her reputation in the industry. The traveling started gradually. First, it was just day trips to nearby cities, then overnight stays became more frequent. By the second year of our marriage, she was gone at least 2 weekends a month, sometimes 3. I missed her terribly, but I understood that her job demanded it. She'd call me every night from her hotel room, telling me about boring conference presentations, difficult clients, and how much she missed our cozy evenings at home watching Netflix together. I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? She'd never given me any reason to doubt her, and I'd always believed that trust was the foundation of any strong relationship. When my friends would joke about how often she was away, making comments about how they'd never let their wives travel so much, I'd defend her fiercely. I was proud of her independence and success, even if it meant spending many lonely evenings by myself. Our routine became predictable and comfortable. She'd pack her small rolling suitcase on Thursday evenings, checking and double-checking that she had all her presentation materials, business cards, and the various pharmaceutical samples she needed for client meetings. I'd help her load everything into her sedan, kiss her goodbye on Friday morning, and then settle into bachelor mode until Sunday evening when she'd return home exhausted but usually in good spirits. I filled those lonely weekends with my own activities. I'd work on home improvement projects we'd been putting off, catch up with friends I didn't see often enough, or sometimes just enjoy the quiet solitude of having the house to myself. I'd grocery shop, do laundry, and have everything perfect for her return. It became a rhythm that worked for both of us, or at least I thought it did. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I was in the middle of organizing our garage when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, thinking it was probably another spam call, but something made me pick up at the last second. The voice on the other end was professional and courteous. The hotel manager explained that they were calling about a watch that had been left behind in room 908 during a recent stay. He said they'd found it while cleaning and wanted to return it to its owner. The problem was, I hadn't stayed in any hotel in months. I work from home and rarely travel anywhere that would require an overnight stay. But room 908 sounded familiar. I racked my brain trying to remember where I'd heard that number before, and then it hit me like a punch to the stomach. 6 months ago, I'd booked that exact room at that exact hotel for a surprise romantic weekend getaway. I'd planned everything meticulously, dinner reservations at her favorite restaurant, couples massage appointments at the hotel spa, even arranged for champagne and strawberries to be waiting in the room when we arrived. The surprise had been perfect. She'd been so touched by the gesture, and we'd had one of the most romantic weekends of our entire relationship. She told me repeatedly how much she loved the hotel, how comfortable the room was, and how we should definitely return someday. We'd made love with the curtains open, looking out at the city skyline, and she'd told me she'd never felt more connected to me than she did in that moment. Now, hearing that room number again in such a different context made my blood run cold. I asked the hotel manager to hold on for a moment while I processed what was happening. My hands were shaking as I tried to think of any reasonable explanation for how my watch could have ended up in that specific room without me being there. I called the hotel back and spoke to a different employee, trying to get more information without sounding suspicious. They confirmed that the room had been occupied by a guest registered under my wife's name just 2 weeks ago. My heart sank as the pieces began falling into place. She'd been there with someone else, someone who had apparently been wearing my watch. The betrayal hit me in waves. First came the disbelief. Surely there was some mistake, some reasonable explanation I wasn't seeing. Then came the anger, burning hot and consuming, making my hands clench into fists. Finally came the devastating sadness, the realization that everything I'd believed about my marriage might have been built on lies. I spent the next 3 days in a haze of confusion and pain. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except the endless loop of questions running through my mind. How long had this been going on? Who was she with? How many of those business trips had actually been romantic getaways with another man? Had she ever actually loved me, or had I been nothing more than a convenient cover story for her real life? Update 1. I decided I needed concrete proof before confronting her. I couldn't bear the thought of accusing her of something so horrible if there was even the slightest chance I was wrong. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I started investigating my own wife's movements and activities. I began by checking our credit card statements more carefully than I ever had before. What I found made my stomach turn. There were charges for expensive dinners at romantic restaurants during her supposed business trips, purchases from lingerie stores I didn't recognize, and hotel room charges that didn't match the modest accommodations her company typically approved for business travel. One charge particularly caught my attention: an expensive bottle of champagne from room service at a luxury resort, ordered on the same weekend she'd told me she was attending a boring pharmaceutical conference in a different city entirely. I remembered that weekend clearly because I'd been worried about her. She'd called me Friday night saying she felt unwell and might not be able to call again until Sunday because she needed to rest and recover. I'd been so concerned that I'd even considered driving to the conference location to take care of her, but she'd insisted she'd be fine and didn't want me to catch whatever bug she thought she was fighting. Now I realized she'd been preventing me from discovering her lies, and the thought of her fake concern for my health while she was actually celebrating with another man made me feel physically sick. The evidence kept mounting. I found receipts for couples activities, wine tastings, romantic dinners, even a couple's spa package at a resort 3 hours away. Each discovery felt like another knife in my back, and I found myself becoming someone I didn't recognize, suspicious, paranoid, and consumed with the need to uncover every detail of her deception. I also noticed changes in her behavior that I'd previously attributed to work stress. She'd become more secretive about her phone, taking it with her even when she went to the bathroom. She'd started working late more often, claiming she had reports to write or client calls to make. She'd also become less interested in our physical relationship, often claiming she was too tired from traveling or too stressed about upcoming presentations. The most painful realization was that I'd been supporting and encouraging the very behavior that was destroying our marriage. Every time I told her how proud I was of her career success, every time I'd helped her pack for another business trip, every time I defended her to friends who questioned her frequent absences, I'd been enabling her affair. I decided I needed to see her in action, to witness firsthand what she was really doing during these supposed business trips. I checked her calendar and found that she had another conference scheduled for the following weekend in a city about 3 hours away. This time, instead of wishing her luck and settling in for another lonely weekend, I was going to follow her and finally learn the truth. The drive to the conference location was the longest 3 hours of my life. I kept oscillating between hope that I'd find her exactly where she said she'd be, attending boring pharmaceutical presentations, and dread that I'd discover something that would end our marriage forever. I'd never felt so alone or so uncertain about my future. Update 2. What I discovered when I arrived at the conference location changed everything in ways I never could have anticipated. The conference was real, and it was happening exactly where she'd said it would be. But she wasn't there. I checked the registration lists, walked through every session room, and even asked some of the pharmaceutical reps I recognized from her company events. Nobody had seen her. My next stop was the hotel where she'd claimed to be staying. The desk clerk confirmed that no one with her name had checked in. I was standing in the lobby, feeling completely lost and confused, when I decided to call her boss directly. I'd met him several times at company parties and holiday events, and I knew he genuinely cared about his employees' well-being. The conversation that followed was unlike anything I could have prepared for. Her boss was initially confused about why I was calling, but when I explained that I was trying to locate my wife at the conference, his confusion turned to concern, then to anger. He told me that she wasn't supposed to be at any conference that weekend. In fact, she'd requested the time off for personal reasons, mentioning something about needing to help a sick family member. But the real shock came when he started asking me questions about her other recent trips. As we compared notes, a disturbing pattern emerged. Many of the business trips she'd told me about didn't exist. Conference dates didn't match her absences, client meetings she described in detail had never been scheduled, and company events she'd claimed to attend had been canceled weeks in advance. Her boss was furious, not just about the lies, but about the implications for the company. If she'd been falsifying business expenses and claiming personal trips as company business, it could be considered fraud. He told me he needed to review all of her recent expense reports and travel claims immediately. But then came the moment that changed everything. As we were talking, he mentioned that the company had been struggling to fill a position in their regional management team. They needed someone with strong organizational skills, attention to detail, and the ability to travel occasionally for legitimate business purposes. Almost jokingly, he said I seemed to have better tracking and investigation skills than most of their current employees. What started as a casual comment turned into a serious conversation about career opportunities. He knew about my background in logistics and operations management, and he'd always been impressed with how I handled myself at company social events. Before I knew it, he was offering me a position with the company. Ironically, the very job my wife had been pretending to do so well. The offer was generous, with a salary significantly higher than what I was currently making, excellent benefits, and the opportunity to build a legitimate career in pharmaceutical sales. But accepting it would mean working for the same company that was about to fire my wife for fraud and deception. I drove home that night with my head spinning from everything that had happened. I'd started the day thinking I was going to confront my wife about an affair, and instead I discovered that her betrayal went far deeper than I'd imagined. She hadn't just been cheating on our marriage, she'd been cheating her employer, lying about her work, and potentially committing fraud with company resources. Final update. The confrontation happened Sunday evening when she returned home from her fake conference weekend. She walked through the door with her usual travel-weary expression, rolling her small suitcase behind her and complaining about flight delays and boring presentations. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, watching her maintain the elaborate fiction she'd constructed. I'd spent the entire weekend deciding how to handle the situation. Part of me wanted to scream in rage about the betrayal, to demand explanations and accountability. Another part of me just wanted to quietly pack my bags and disappear, leaving her to deal with the consequences of her actions alone. But ultimately, I decided that honesty deserved honesty, even if hers had been in short supply. I told her I knew everything. I didn't give her a chance to lie or make excuses. I simply laid out all the evidence I'd gathered, from the hotel room revelation to the conversation with her boss. I watched her face cycle through surprise, denial, anger, and finally a kind of resigned defeat. She tried to explain, of course. She talked about feeling trapped in our routine, about needing excitement and adventure, about how the lying had started small but snowballed beyond her control. She claimed she loved me but had fallen in love with someone else too, as if that somehow made the betrayal more acceptable. She even tried to minimize the work situation, saying she'd always planned to pay back any money she'd inappropriately claimed from the company. But her explanations felt hollow and self-serving. What hurt most wasn't even the affair. It was the realization that the woman I loved and trusted had been living a completely fabricated life for months, maybe years. Every conversation we'd had about her work, every story she'd told about difficult clients or successful presentations, every time she'd called me from a hotel room claiming to miss me, all of it had been carefully constructed lies. The practical consequences came swiftly. Her boss called Monday morning to formally terminate her employment and informed her that the company would be conducting a full audit of her expense accounts. Depending on what they found, there might be legal consequences beyond just losing her job. Our joint finances were about to become much more complicated, and the prospect of legal bills added another layer of stress to an already overwhelming situation. But then came the unexpected opportunity. I accepted the job offer from her former company. It felt strange and somewhat surreal, but it was also the best career opportunity I'd been presented with in years. The work was engaging, the travel was legitimate and purposeful, and I found that I had a natural aptitude for building relationships with healthcare providers and understanding their needs. My new colleagues were professional and welcoming, though everyone was aware of the unusual circumstances that had led to my hiring. Some of them had worked with my wife and were shocked by the revelations about her behavior. Others were simply glad to have someone reliable filling a position that had become increasingly problematic. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now doing the job she'd pretended to do, visiting the same clients she'd claimed to serve, attending the conferences she'd supposedly found so boring. But I discovered that I genuinely enjoyed the work. There was satisfaction in building real professional relationships, in providing valuable information to healthcare providers, and in contributing to outcomes that actually helped patients. As for my marriage, it couldn't survive the weight of so much deception. We tried counseling briefly, but it became clear that we'd lost any foundation of trust on which to rebuild. The divorce proceedings were complicated by the financial implications of her job loss and potential legal troubles, but we managed to reach an amicable settlement. The most unexpected part of this entire experience has been discovering who I really am when I'm not living in someone else's shadow. For years, I defined myself primarily as her supportive husband, the person who made it possible for her to pursue her career dreams. Now I'm building my own professional identity and finding that I'm capable of much more than I'd ever imagined. I still travel for work now, staying in hotels and attending conferences in cities across multiple states. But everything about these trips is genuine, the purpose is real, the relationships I'm building are authentic, and when I call friends or family from hotel rooms, I'm exactly where I say I am, doing exactly what I say I'm doing. Sometimes I think about that phone call from the hotel manager and how different my life might be if he'd never found my watch in room 908. I might still be living in blissful ignorance, supporting a woman who was systematically deceiving me while building a secret life with someone else. Or maybe I would have discovered the truth eventually through some other means. What I know for certain is that as painful as this experience has been, it's also been liberating. I'm no longer living a lie, even if I wasn't the one telling it. I'm building something real and honest, both professionally and personally. And while I never would have chosen this path, I'm discovering that sometimes the most devastating betrayals can lead to the most unexpected opportunities for growth and authentic happiness. The watch, incidentally, was returned to me by mail. It's a simple timepiece, nothing particularly valuable or meaningful, but it serves as a reminder of how the smallest details can unravel the most elaborate deceptions. I wear it every day now, not as a symbol of what I lost, but as a reminder of the importance of living truthfully and authentically, no matter how complicated that might sometimes be.